the absolute horror that confronts you with of what happens when the armed wing of the state show up over something that you've said.
So it's a very, very consistent pattern. And I think that hopefully, because this case has really broken through, really cut through with people, we'll be able to start saying, yeah, and guess what? This has been happening for a long time.
But it is a reminder that particularly toxic mix of like Greenism, identity politics, and now the Gaza issue is something, it's a bad smell that will continue to hang around.
Hello and welcome to the Spiked podcast. I'm Fraser Myers, Deputy Editor of Spiked. Delighted as ever to be joined by Spiked Editor Thomas Slater.
Hello.
And our extra special guest this week from the Free Speech Union, Connie Shaw.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Coming up on the pod today, we'll be discussing Graham Linehan's arrest, the Green Party leadership, and Keir Starmer's plastic patriotism. So Graham Linehan, legendary comedy writer, friend of the show, was arrested as soon as he touched down in London Heathrow earlier this week. 5 armed officers were at the scene ready to apprehend him. This was over 3 quite jokey, gender-critical tweets. Now, Tom, there's been a lot of cases like this. It won't surprise anyone who has followed the free speech issue, but there's something about this case that seems to have woken a lot of people up, I think it's fair to say, to the dangers that we're seeing.
No, absolutely. I think it could well be a line in the sand, and it really should be. I think the reason that there's been so much interest in it, apart from the fact that Graham is a prominent public figure, both in his previous incarnations as well as being a kind of gender-critical crusader of recent years, is also the fact that it's really hammered home how authoritarian and cruel these speech policing laws are, the zeal with which the police pursue them as well. The fact that you've got him getting off of his flight from Arizona, being arrested at Heathrow Airport by 5 armed police, taken to a cell, interviewed, and then the experience being so stressful for him that he ends up in A&E with sky-high blood pressure. I mean, just the absolute horror that confronts you with of what happens when the armed wing of the state show up over something that you've said, not something that you've done, not any violence that you've committed, but supposedly tweets that you posted months ago, which may have the potential to spark violence. I mean, it's worth saying that the tweets in general, these are jokes. I mean, even the one that has been pointed to specifically about, to put it gently, what women should do to a trans-identified male, where they should punch him if they happen into women's spaces, trying to deter him from doing so again. It's quite clearly a joke. It's quite clearly light-hearted, and yet the fact that this was being taken as if he was seriously trying to direct violence against people is absolutely absurd. I think it's just confronted with people with not only how authoritarian and absurd these rules are, but also the way in which it just, this whole speech policing crusade chews people up and spits them out. And I think Graham's a good example of that. This isn't the first time he's been visited by the police. Time and time again, he's seen the same pattern repeating itself. Some trans activist with an axe to grind, it basically enlists the police force as their personal goon squad by making a series of vexatious complaints against them. It's pretty plausible, shall we say, that could have happened in this case as well. And hopefully we're starting to see a bit of a crack in this whole edifice. It's been fascinating seeing Labour politicians falling over themselves to say that maybe these laws are a problem. Maybe the police should focus on policing the street rather than policing the tweets. Literally cribbing lines that we've been saying for years. I don't think all that's sincere, but I think they've noticed that the public have noticed, if you see what I mean, and that people are really alarmed at how bad things have got.
Definitely. And Connie, this is a shocking case, but it's hardly an aberration. These things are quite sadly very common.
Yeah, I mean, like Tom was saying, this case is making everyone notice. I mean, it's been covered on every news channel, whether it's BBC, LBC, and all the normal places like Spiked that are covering free speech issues. It's absolutely everywhere. It's being at the top of the hour on, breakfast shows, prime time radio, and that doesn't normally happen for free speech issues up until this point. But unfortunately, it's become a very recognisable and consistent pattern of what basically is bad actors who are reporting what they find offensive, or honestly, in my opinion, they just want to ruin these people's lives because these people, in my opinion, are so angry that they cannot bear to see people rising against what they have managed ultimately for the last few years to suppress. They managed for a long time to scare people, and now people aren't as scared anymore, and they can't stand it, and they want to ruin these people's lives. And when they report these things, the police actually take them seriously, to the extent Graham was arrested with 5 armed police officers. But this year, I mean, we've had about, I top of my head, 3 major cases that have reach the press, and they are only the ones you hear about, the ones that you hear about in the press. 30 people a day being arrested for what they say online. But similarly with Julian Fox, obviously the iconic Brexity Books police raid of his house. He was detained. Eventually, we managed to get him £20,000 in compensation, him being a former police officer himself. Then we have Maxi Allen and Rosalind Levine, also arrested, taken away to custody, released on bail, and we're looking to get compensation for them as well. And then Robert Moss, our most recent case, he was arrested at 7 a.m. outside his house. He had his house raided, had his devices seized. That's a very similar theme as well. Graham had his devices seized. Robert's bail conditions meant he couldn't even talk about the fact he'd been arrested. We managed to get those overturned. And obviously Graham's bail conditions that he does not go on X. So it's a very, very consistent pattern. And I think that hopefully, because this case has really broken through, really cut through people, we'll be able to start saying, yeah, and guess what? This has been happening for a long time. And so when you have people like Ben Kentish, as an example, who I was up against the other week, who is still saying the idea that there's a free speech crisis country is a dog whistle. I don't know what more needs to happen. It's people, what else? And, his question to me was, what can you not say in this country without getting arrested that you think you should be able to? But my first response is, well, why is getting arrested the line that you draw as being, what about when you lose your job or you get expelled from university or you've been disciplined at work? Why is it getting arrested that is the point for some people, that's the only sign that it's bad? So yeah, I'm really hoping this will be the straw that breaks the camel's back. I mean, within hours, Elon Musk was tweeting about it. J.K. Rowling tweeting about it. Obviously, historically, there's been a bit of tension there with Graham talking publicly about the fact that he hasn't had very much or any really vocal support from J.K. Rowling, but she did comment on this case on Twitter. So it really has done the rounds. And people cannot ignore it anymore. And you're right, Tom, politicians can't ignore it anymore.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the sort of slightly insincere response from the likes of Keir Starmer. We've also had Wes Streeting saying, well, maybe these laws need to be looked at.
Yeah.
Even Mark Rowley from the police, blaming the laws, saying the police have no other choice. These are quite disingenuous responses, aren't they, Tom?
No, absolutely. I mean, to focus on one in particular, in terms of the disingenuousness, I think Sir Mark Rowley's comments are really telling. Because to go around and suggest that the problem here is the law and that if the politicians change the law, then everything would be absolutely fine is a nonsense. The police have become very willing, almost zealous participants in the whole speech policing venture. The Free Speech Union, you've encountered many of these cases, but the number of times where people are confronted and told that they are being arrested on suspicion of an offence that doesn't actually exist. I mean, the case of Maxi Allen and Rosalind Levine in Borehamwood, who were essentially arrested, held in a cell for a number of hours, subject to a 5-week investigation because they got in a protracted, lovely online row with their child's school. At one point during police interviews, she was told that she committed slander against someone who worked at the school. This is not a criminal matter whatsoever. And the fact that Rosalind happens to be a true crime producer, the fact that she could see through that. This is a story you see repeating itself time and again. The number of times that there's even been cases which end up getting to court. There was the Kate Scotto case, I think it was 2017, 2018. It's a feminist. She got into a Twitter row with a trans activist who she proceeded to accurately gender, shall we say. She gets arrested. She's put in a cell for a number of hours. She ends up actually being convicted of harassment. It only gets overturned on appeal when our great criminal justice system slowly realised that essentially calling a man is not yet a crime in this country. So the number of times in which you've got police forces, even prosecutors, sometimes even judges, pushing the law far beyond the bounds of where it currently is, even before we get into a discussion about how out of control the statute book is really telling. I think where the police are concerned, even though this would strike people as crazy if you said it 20 years ago, they've become the kind of wokest part of the state in many respects, because there has been this desperation to redress what are perceived as kind of past wrongs. They've committed the most kind of perverse overcorrection, where they go around basically acting as the personal goon squad of any identitarian activist who's willing to complain to them. And things like non-crime hate incidents are a really good example. That was never the practice of collecting these things, not criminal speech, but speech which someone has deemed to be offensive and therefore has to be noted, therefore has to go down on your records. This is something that the police basically invented out of whole cloth. It does go back to the Stephen Lawrence inquiry and so on and so forth. But this whole practice was dreamt up by the College of Policing, and they had some guides 2014. Here we go. So the idea that this is purely about the law is obviously a nonsense. But obviously the question we do need to have at the moment is how do we start ripping these laws up? Because if people are shocked by what happened to Graham Linehan, then they will soon realise that there's many Graham Linehans in this, and many people who don't have the luxury of a big platform, who won't get on the front page of the Sun newspaper when they're arrested. There are so many, literally thousands of people every year, as we know, who are being dragged through this cruel and authoritarian process. So hopefully it's a discussion about how the hell we saw the police out.
And Connie, I mean, why is this still happening, do you think, with the trans debate in particular? Because, there have been so many legal cases around this. The Supreme Court has pretty much established that the gender critical view is the law of the land. We've had the Maya Forstater case that says the gender critical beliefs are protected in law, certainly in relation to the workplace at any rate. And of course, the idea that a man can't become a woman is basic biological truth, a scientific, uncontestable fact. And yet still people are being arrested over this, over words that offend the most extreme trans activists.
I honestly don't know why it is that it's still happening because, forget the Supreme Court judgment. What about the fact that Maya won her case in 2021? Since then, we should have seen the end of this. But I think there's I'm not a legal expert, but from my understanding and what I have seen through learning more about the way that the free speech laws or the laws that actually suppress free speech in this country is that so many of our laws rely on the perceived offence of the supposed victim. If you look at the way that non-crime hate incidents are defined, it's about the alleged victim perceiving a sort of prejudice on the basis of their characteristic rather than, I guess in the law it does, it has to be intent and this, that and the other, but it's very much focused on the feelings. I mean, that sounds really cliche to say, but it is. And you look at the way that it actually plays out, it is based on the way that people perceive language, and that cannot be the way that we police people's speech. But going back to what you were saying about Mark Rowley's comments, Tom, it is the case that the police just don't understand the law. The free speech protections that we have in law, they could be a lot better in the UK, but they are actually very strong. And what's quite astonishing about Graham's case is that originally the Met said that they had arrested him on suspicion of inciting violence. Now, not only is that not actually an offence in this country, when people say inciting violence, what they really mean is encouraging violent disorder. Like, they're different terms, so the police aren't even using the right terms if it even was the offence that they arrested him on. But then they changed what they were saying, said, actually, we've arrested him on suspicion of Section 3A of the Public Order Act. The Section 3A of the Public Order Act refers to stirring up hatred on the basis of religion or sexual orientation, neither of which Graham has done. So it's really, really strange as to what they think he's done and what law they think they're using to arrest him on suspicion of. So the Free Speech Union are now helping Graham sue the Met Police, not only for unlawful imprisonment, unlawful arrest, also for defamation, because they've publicised the fact that he's supposedly incited violence, and he hasn't. Similarly to, even if it went to trial, one of Lucy Connolly's claims, or she said, at least in her interview, that even if she had pleaded not guilty and then it had gone to trial, the fact that the CPS misrepresented her statement to the police when she was interviewed, which was a misrepresentation because her solicitor managed to overturn it, because that had been so widely publicised, the claim that she had said that she thinks that migrants are dangerous around children, that it wouldn't have been a fair trial anyway. So the police keep making these mistakes. How many times do they keep making these mistakes until there is a huge reckoning? And hopefully this will be the time that it actually comes and something gets sorted out.
And the fact that the rest of the world has noticed, I think, will be hugely significant. Not just America, but much of the West have realised that, particularly Britain, but much of Western Europe as well, have been engaged in this experiment with policing hatred over the course of the past 60 years, essentially. It's been slowly building up. And that it's produced deeply troubling authoritarian results. If you're locking up people, comedy writers at airports with armed police officers, like, surely this is the point at which just shrugging this off as not really a big issue has to end. And I hope we just get a much more clear-eyed discussion now about how we go about doing this. I mean, where the police are concerned, we've got to kick the activist groups out. I mean, the extent to which they still are basically towards kind of Stonewall ideology was pretty clear from Graham's interview. They were talking about where people identify the sex that they were assigned at birth and identifying as something other than that. I mean, this is pure activist language. And where did they get that from? Also, I think we've got to kick the graduates out of the police force as well. There's been a big turn towards making sure you need to have a degree before you get in there. I think that's been disastrous for the police force as well as many other institutions in society. And then the law, I mean, we need to look at the Public Order Act, particularly in relation to incitement to hatred, which is an entirely nebulous term, which gets us into all kinds of problems when you're trying to adjudicate that kind of offence. The communications offences, whether it's the Communications Act, Section 127, the restriction on grossly offensive speech. If you got rid of that, you would wipe out, I would probably suggest, the vast majority of the speech offences in this country, because the bar is so low. And also that combination of having that in the statute book and living in the age of social media is just a recipe for literally thousands of arrests, as we've seen. And we just need to essentially have almost like a great repeal of all of these things that have built up over the years. It's nice that there's some political momentum behind it now. Also some party political momentum, which has been entirely lacking. I mean, up until about 5 minutes ago, even the Conservative Party were adding to the speech laws rather than taking them away. But I think certainly the two parties on the right of British politics at the moment are going to run with this. And I think that could be potentially quite fruitful. It certainly will shift the debate away from something that's just had amongst journalists and academics and members of the public, something that could actually have some political consequence, which is surely what we all want.
This episode of the Spike podcast is sponsored by Shopify. Running a small business can be hugely rewarding, but without the help of a marketing department, graphic designers, and accountants, you can sometimes feel like you're on your own and you don't know how to grow. That's where Shopify comes in. Shopify is the commerce platform supporting millions of businesses all over the world, from small brands just getting started to established household names like Mattel and Gymshark. Shopify is who they trust to take their business to the next level. With Shopify, there's no need to learn tricky technical skills like graphic design or coding. Shopify's own design studio comes with hundreds of ready-to-use templates that speak to your brand from the start. If you need a snappy headline or sales pitch, Shopify's handy AI tools can generate polished content for your business at the touch of a button. It can even help you build social media campaigns to keep your customers in the loop. You'll feel like you've got a whole team behind you, even if you're the only person in your business. And the best part yet, Shopify offers world-class expertise on everything from supply chain management to international shipping. Whatever your business's needs are, you can rest easy in the knowledge that Shopify's got your back. If you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify. Turn your big business idea into cash with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your £1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.co.uk/spiked. Go to shopify.co.uk/spiked. That's shopify.co.uk/spiked.
So the Green Party has a new leader in the form of Zack Polanski. He's a bit of a Corbynista, a self-styled eco-populist. Before he was in the Greens, he was a Lib Dem and also worked as a hypnotist who believed that he could increase the size of women's boobs with the power of his mind.
I'm still laughing at that every time I hear it. But...
And I think it needs to be brought up every time in public. Tom, I mean, this is I guess in a long line of kooks and cranks leading the Greens. I don't think there's I don't think you can be a sensible Green no matter how much you...
No, absolutely. I mean, if there's anyone who's going to convince the public that the Greens are not all cranks, it's Hypno Tits over there. So that's going to be absolutely fascinating. I mean, he is an interesting character insofar as he's clearly captured the mood amongst kind of annoyed left-wing Britain, so-called, people who feel like the Labour Party is insufficiently socialist and anti-Semitic. It's that kind of energy which is behind your party. It's that kind of energy which is behind this new Green Party, which is very much kind of leaning in to, shall we say, the kind of Bristol and Brighton part of the Green coalition. They've often picked up a lot of votes in like the rural areas, people who care primarily about rivers and so on, small C Conservatives, but they've also, the student vote, the kind of young professional vote, that's clearly where he sees the future as. It's something which, whilst it's never going to be a huge voting bloc in this country, shall we say, there is a constituency for that. People who love recycling as much as they dislike the working class, and it's that kind of cohort that we can all recognise. And even if we're only talking about what Greens about like 7-8% in the polls at the moment, even if that ticks up, that's enough to be a problem for Keir Starmer in certain seats. Certainly, if they continue to lean into the Gaza question, as the Greens already have been doing over recent years. So it's not nothing what that you're seeing this kind of essentially kind of a couple of new Corbynite parties cropping up outside the Labour Party. But you do wonder, like, to what end? I mean, this politics is so incredibly toxic. I mean, it was already so authoritarian and reactionary in terms of the Green agenda. People wanting to get elected to Parliament to make working class people's lives worse. I mean, it's absolutely horrific. But the fact that it's now latched onto identity politics, that it's now latched onto essentially Hamas apologism. The number of Green councillors, by the way, and Green officials who after the last election were found to have said some pretty questionable things about October the 7th is very, very striking. And of course, they just elected Mohsin Ali, the Leeds councillor, who everyone will remember from his count where he shouted Allahu Akbar and this is for Gaza. He's now the co-deputy leader. So it's not to say that this is an insignificant phenomenon. It certainly could be a headache for the Labour Party, but it is a reminder that that particularly toxic mix of like Greenism, identity politics, and now the Gaza issue is something, is a bad smell that will continue to hang around us. But
Yeah. Connie, one thing that struck me is how hard he's gone in on the trans issue. In particular, even saying, you know, in relation to our last question, he's one of the few people in public life who's saying he agrees with the arrest of Graham Linehan and supports the police in their endeavours on that front, but not in any other endeavours, of course.
Well, to be fair to you, he did say he thought maybe 5 armed police was a bit too much.
one or two, be all right.
Yeah, basically. Well, to be honest, I do understand why people like him. I understand why he won. He says what people in that camp like to hear, and he does say it well. You know, whether or not you think it's a load of rubbish, what rubbish that he's saying is said quite well. And so, yeah, I'm not surprised that he's won. He is saying what they like to hear. And I actually, even though it's hard to listen to what he's saying, I do think he deals quite well with media. Even when he is asked all the time about this hypnotist stuff, he's able to, you know, sort of say that he doesn't believe in it anymore, even though it's like, well, did you ever believe in it? I don't know. It's just such a mess. But he was never going to be able to live that down. But on to Mohsin Ali. I was at uni when I was still at Leeds Student Radio, when I was on Politics Hour, when he was elected to Hare Hills. And I couldn't believe, I think I have always been aware that there was an issue with Islam, even when I was 15, 16. Like Christopher Hitchens was my first sort of intellectual hero that I was absolutely obsessed with. And so when I saw that happen, it was so shocking. And I think that I hadn't really thought about Islam as a sort of big concern for a long time. And when I saw that happen so close to me in the city that I had been living in, going to uni, and everyone, like the Greens are very popular because it's a student area, and it blew my mind that other people, even my friends I was talking to on the podcast, I remember one of my friends said to me, but if you heard a Christian say, oh, thank you, Jesus, or something, you wouldn't be batting an eyelid at all. Well, I don't really want any religion that involved in politics, but frankly, no, I'm far more scared of someone saying, Allahu Akbar, this is to the people of Gaza, than someone saying, thank you, Jesus. And I think that's not a controversial thing to say, but it is considered controversial. Like, that is the war cry of Islamism. And, well, I'm peaked on this issue now, as I am with, as I had been with trans, and I still am, obviously, but it's in plain sight. And like you say, the things that he was saying on October 7th, and people just seem to not be talking about
that video is recent.
He is a deputy leader of a populist party. And how on earth they're going to reconcile the two issues together, which is one of the questions that Nikki Campbell put to Zack on 5 Live yesterday when I was on with him. And they're still going with this sort of, well, if you actually look, you know, how he's a Jewish man, and how Mohsin is a Muslim, and how they're, you know, this is a really great sort of diverse coalition. Look how great we're combining all of these different identities. It's like, okay, but this is the most shallow form of this is when identity politics really will show what it's actually about, because you can't hide the actual differences here. Identity politics was all nice when there was sort of a clear coalition between people. You could understand how this sort of postmodern stuff worked together, but actually it's not going to work this time. It's actually started this sort of conflict between the two ideologies. When you look at Adnan Hussein on Twitter having a bit of a spat of India Willoughby, and because he's getting a lot of messages from gender critical women who are pro-Palestinian, who are asking your party, so what's your stance on single-sex spaces? And he's saying, I understand this issue, and I understand how important it is. And that is really annoying the people who are so progressive but care even more about Gaza than the people who would normally be attracted to the Greens. So it's already starting. How long they're able to sort of pretend it's not an issue will be very interesting to see.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's first of all, it's clear that anti-Israel sentiment will be the glue for these people for a while, but it's only going to go on for so long. And also, what I think has been really clear, and you made the point there, is that this is the sort of stage on from wokeness that we're dealing with now. That phase is kind of over to a certain extent, or at least some of those arguments have been pushed back pretty sufficiently. But this kind of more what's the word, kind of barbarian turn that we've had in relation to glorifying Hamas, in relation to this kind of extreme third worldism to the point of justifying massacres and rapes, or at least ignoring them. This kind of anti-Western attitude, which was always pretty sort of implicit in a lot of the woke critiques, is now becoming incredibly explicit. And the Green Party and your party in different ways are expressing that. You know, the fact that whatever this kind of identitarian thing was, it's now morphing into something more explicitly barbaric, and certainly willing to justify very barbaric acts. And the fact that we do have a deputy leader of what is supposed to be, broadly speaking, a some form of challenger party, who on October the 7th, or certainly immediately after, was making this video on TikTok referring to the resistance.
Yeah.
This is new territory for us, even if we don't think they're going to be troubling Downing Street anytime.
Definitely. And it is worth saying that the Green Party is, if anywhere is going to host it should be the Green Party. This is a party, a lot of people don't know the history.
Yeah.
It's a breakaway from the Conservative Party. A group of people read an article in Playboy magazine about overpopulation, got very concerned, had a meeting, set up a party. One of the first policies in their program was we need to roll out sterilizations to reduce the population by 20%. 10 years later, you have David Icke as one of the lead spokespersons, who would later come out as the Messiah and tell us that the world is run by a hybrid between humans and reptiles. And now you have Zack Polanski, who thinks that women can have penises, and your man Nothin Ali, who thinks that rape is resistance. So,
The proud
tradition. Proud and quite great. So Keir Starmer has expressed his love for the St George's Cross and the Union flag. He says he's always in front of a Union Jack, and that he has a big England flag in his Downing Street flat. Yvette Cooper as well, the Home Secretary, has also been very enthusiastic about the flag. She says, get them out, hang them up, and apparently has loads of bunting in her shed. I mean, I'm sure it remains there, and we, she'll never have to bring it out. But
yeah.
Connie, what do you make of this? I mean, I'm fascinated by this sudden turn towards patriotism, because I'm sure maybe people might not have suspected that was what Keir Starmer was into.
No, and I think it's extremely clever of them, actually, because they haven't bitten, and that's what everyone, I think, not hoped, but expected, and now they haven't. And that has been very surprising for a lot of people. And there's, it's like, oh, okay, they don't care. So I do actually think it's very clever of them to not, like Keir Starmer has in the past, shame everyone for being so-called far right.
Yeah.
They've just gone along with it, because how can you as a Prime Minister say anything other than, of course, the flag is patriotic? And as soon as you get into the weeds of the argument, it's like, well, what's the actual intention?
Yeah.
Then that's not going to do anything other than sow further division, and which apparently he is against, of course. So yeah, I think it's a very clever political move, to be honest, and I'm quite impressed by his advisors for once.
Although it's almost a little bit overcompensating. I think, Keir does protest too much a little bit, Tom. I don't know what you think.
No, I love the quotes where he was talking about, I love the England flag. It's a great symbol of our nation.
I'm very encouraging of flags. Was a really good, very normal thing to say.
No, this is from the heart. This is, I mean, it's the overcompensation. It's this fact that kind of reeks of desperation to a certain extent. It's kind of patriotic dad dancing to a certain, it looks inauthentic and cringe and a bit forced, which I think people can smell a mile off.
Everything about Keir Starmer feels like that.
No,
I don't think there's any. I don't think he could have said anything about this in a positive way that he could have gotten away with without someone saying, "Oh, this is clearly pretend."
But I think it's almost like show don't tell would have been a bit better. I think and the fact that they were making a point of not resiling from having the Union Jack at certain events and whatever and refusing to condemn people because they're putting England and Union flags up on lampposts and whatever is exactly the right move. But this kind of overcompensation has made them easy for attack, because I don't think there's anything they can do to get over the sense that they're not particularly, whether it's not they're particularly patriotic, but there is certainly a cultural cringe about the way most people express their patriotism, if that makes sense. But there is this climate around the liberal left establishment in general, which resonates very much with that old George Orwell line about there's a certain type of intellectual who'd rather steal from a call box and sing the national anthem. That kind of exists. And as much as they try and make up for it, it just, I think, continues to show that they don't really get it, or that they feel the need to almost... It almost becomes slightly patronizing after a certain point. It's like, see, I'm just like you, and it becomes a little bit cringe. But you're right insofar as it was good that they didn't come out and start saying, we all know what this is about. This flag is a far right symbol or whatever. But I don't think it would do them any favors. I don't think it would get them any any credit in the bank just because it looks really kind of awkward. And I think it's another reminder of the kind of cultural chasm that exists between the government and the public who are furious with them. Yeah, I mean, the flag thing in general, I mean, just obviously, despite people trying to claim that this is a far-right symbol, it's clearly a patriotic thing. But I also think it's a class thing, broadly speaking. When, you know, Emily Thornberry was sneering at that England flag, it was because it was hung over a white van. You know, I think if that was up a flagpole on a country estate, she wouldn't have batted an eyelid about it. So I think it kind of maps onto a general sense of kind of fear and loathing of ordinary people as much as anything else. And that it's impossible for them to get over. However much bunting they choose to put up, I don't think that'll be a bridge that they...
Yeah, and there's always, I mean, obviously Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper have never said anything quite as bad as Emily Thornberry or shown that sneer quite so tellingly. But there is always the sense that, you know, you think back to when Keir Starmer was asked, does he prefer Davos or Westminster? And he immediately didn't miss a beat, said Davos. You know that he prefers international law and international institutions, from the EU to the ECHR to our own, you know, elected parliament as well. So there is always that sort of tension there. How much do they trust? How much they like Britain, how much they like the British people, how much they approve of British democracy, which is really the key question here.
Thank you so much for watching the Spiked podcast. We'll be back at the same time next week. In the meantime, why not subscribe to Spike's YouTube channel and then click the bell so you're always alerted whenever there's some new content. Spiked is producing more videos than ever, from podcasts like this one to interviews to our series of polemics. You really, really don't want to miss out on it. Plus, to get your daily dose of Spiked, just go to spiked-online.com. That's our website at spiked-online.com.